All right, so we are just coming off a two-parter, unintentional two-parter, but you get to talking about gear and, you lose track of time. Today, this episode, let's focus on hunting strategies. So you're in a new state. You've found your area. Maybe you've done a little scouting. What are some things you're looking for, like, on the ground as you're hunting?
It's really falling back on those points that those pins that you put on, months before leading up to the trip, because you're not going in there blind. You have some sort of intel. Like, you can look back on your maps and find those pins and say, okay, I'm going to go check out this spot first. Or if you're feeling a little bit unleery about it, like, I kind of want to go in there, but I just made up a word.
Unleery? I didn't even make a face. I'm so used. I made a little face. I'm so used to it. I know what you meant. Yeah. Everybody knows.
If you're feeling a little leery about that spot.
Or unleery.
Like, comes back to that patience. Give yourself a little bit of patience and maybe stay back a little bit from that point without really checking it out and just kind of start working your way
into the zone. I love that. Yeah, it's hard to do, but if you're being careful and you're trying not to blow out an area, that is helpful. I also, just like basic stuff that I had kind of been thinking about this question, is like, I don't know, fresh white acorns on the ground, like, sweet. You treat that as a food plot, right? Look for fresh sign, ag fields, fruit trees. In Michigan, for example, it's not uncommon to go out into public land and find a bunch of old apple trees that were once an orchard, reclaimed by the state or whatever, right? So those are things I always think about, and like we've talked about in the past, like what funnels deer. So how can you take this big area and make it smaller and smaller and smaller? And sometimes it's easier to do that in planning, but then when you get out there, it's more daunting,
Right. I mean, you can have that whole place peppered with pins, and maybe a third of them are going to be actually where you want to target. Because again, we've had this where it's like, oh, this is going to be like the best spot. This is like my honey hole the whole trip. I'm going to save it for the perfect day, the right wind. And you get there and there's no fresh sign anywhere to be seen. And it's like, then now what? But if you just need to go there and look for fresh sign.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing.
Hunt where the deer are.
Hunt where the deer are, not
where you want them to be, where you planned on them to be. Yeah, totally. Even and it changes. So early season, deer are very predictable. Food to bed, bed to food. Rut, they're all over the place. Even they get pressured during mid-October. That can be kind of funny. Late season is it's like a season that I think people don't value enough, because deer they go back to being super predictable again. And you have the benefit a lot of times with snow to see fresh signs. So I love hunting in the snow. I love late season just because you can at least make educated guesses where deer are. Sometimes it feels like the rut, just like you're just out there and you're waiting for lightning to strike. And obviously there are things you can do to narrow that down, but I feel like it takes a lot more preparation to be consistent in the early and then in the late season.
Well, I mean, we've had that on a trip, actually. We arrived at camp at 60-degree weather, and we're walking around having a great time, and a few days later we wake up and it's almost 2 feet of snow that we woke up to. Everything's covered. I mean, that's a great time to go out there and scout and different stuff. It's easy to move around. It's quiet. You can see where fresh sign is, where the deer are moving, and you can make a strategy on it. Obviously, it was a situation that we weren't expecting, but we used it to our advantage.
Yeah, definitely gotten a deer that way. Quick shout out to another amazing sponsor of ours, Kifaru International. If you're like us and love hunting in some of the toughest places, you know how crucial having the right gear is. Kifaru makes some of the toughest, most reliable backpacks and tents out there, and it's all made right here in America. Whether you're hunting in the backcountry or headed to your favorite deer stand, Kifaru has you covered. Keep your eyes out this year, especially as they're launching a ton of amazing new products like the new Arc frame that just came out. So next time you gear up for an adventure, make sure to check out Kifaru International. All right, so we talked about the rut earlier in the series. You're like, oh, it's my favorite time to go out of the state, right? And you will this year. You and I will go out of the state this year to hunt during the rut. When we're doing that this year, and that's TBD state, which we actually it's already been deed. It's been determined, but we're just not going to say it now. But we're headed out of the state. We find during the rut, what are you going to be looking at? What things are you going to be focusing on for that?
I could say another cliche answer and just say pinch points, travel areas, those topographical draws,
high traffic areas.
Yeah.
I will say one more. I'll go specific with it, and I was thinking about this today. I like where a river goes, and then it dips down, and then it goes again, like an oxbow. I've seen that does will bed in there, and then I'll have found that bucks will travel across that opening of that oxbow so they can cover more ground, waiting for that scent to blow out from there, and they can scent check does that way. If I'll bring it back to something you and I have done. Remember that, the spot I've talked about where you'd one time missed a buck. It's not too far down the road from where we are right now. It's along a river. And there is a spot to the east, the very east. There's a swampy spot down there. I thought about that, and I've not actually checked it out yet because we haven't spent much time out there. But where I would imagine does would bed down, and I would imagine bucks are probably checking, counting on that west wind to blow that scent out, and then moving along kind of north and south along that piece of property.
Yeah, I could see that. That'd be a good spot for an animal ambush.
Yeah. I did. You know what? I did hit that one. I found a buck I had a trail camera with a cell cam. It went off in the afternoon, and I went out there and I rattled, and that buck was scent checking does, and I rattled that buck too close and too fast. I couldn't shoot it. Right. It literally came in while I'm pants around the ankles. It's just goes to show, and it's a good advice for anybody. It's like, if you rattle, be ready to shoot quick. Because I rattled, and I'm like setting it down. I'm looking around, and I look up, and this buck is coming. Seriously, he does an L and is walking straight at me, and I couldn't get a shot off. So that being said, grunting, rattling, calling, bleeding, whatever, cans that sound like the moo cans. What do you do that when you're out of state? Like, what's your approach to that?
Yeah, I'll bring a grunt tube.
Just a grunt tube?
Yeah, just a grunt tube.
No antlers?
Nope. I mean, I've brought them on in the past. I shouldn't say that. I've definitely brought them on.
I mean, you do you. I'm not judging. Just what do you?
I haven't personally seen any success with rattling antlers or rattle bag or anything like that. So it's hard for me to say, I'm going to go out there and rattle up a storm and draw on a buck when I've never done it before. So, and then it could just be the area that we're in. They're just pressured and don't respond to it. And maybe they do in other areas.
I don't think you're rattling.
I could probably.
I want to jump in. I don't think you're rattle enough.
I probably don't.
I was so call adverse. You and I grew up like people saying, you don't call a Michigan, they're not gonna come in, whatever. I've started to say screw it and try it. We were talking about that island hunt on a previous episode. Rattled that buck in. The one right down the road, I almost said the spot. Rattled that buck in. Like I have rattled several times bucks in when I feel like I had no business having them come near me. So I will say, I mean, maybe it scares them away too. Maybe half the time I'm rattling, I'm scaring them away. But I love tinkling sometimes.
The other half, they're coming in.
Yeah. So it's something. I don't know. It's one of those things. It's like you have your own opinion. And so many people have opinions about it. It's like, I only do bleeds or I only do calls. I never touch a bleed can.
No.
I have it somewhere buried. It's the same as that moo cow. Did you ever remember that you tipped a moo cow upside down? But I don't know if I just don't feel like I don't have it's got no, like it's got no positive vibes for me. It's got no juju, like it's just not the right thing. So I'll bring a call. I'll bring a grunt. I'll do a grunt call and I'll do antlers, and that's usually my go-to. OnX is the title sponsor of our podcast here at the Fair Chase, and it's a must-have app for all of us who love to explore the outdoors. Whether you're hunting or hiking or fly fishing, OnX gives you detailed, accurate maps right at your fingertips. With property boundaries, topographical features, and trail data, you'll always know where you are and where you're headed. You'll also likely be able to figure out where that big buck is headed to. Plus, their offline maps mean you're covered even in the most remote locations. onX is the ultimate tool for outdoor navigation, making every adventure safer and more enjoyable. Download onX today and explore with confidence.
Recently, I've been messing around with this for a little while, but if I am out at my spot and I got my trees all set up with my saddle and the sticks are already up, I'll come back down. Or if I'm close to the tree that I'm trying to get to, I will do my little grunt or a buck run. Yeah, just do like a little trot, just like the sound of a buck chasing a doe, and I'll just trot around in the woods, snap a few sticks, and just let out a few little grunts while I'm doing it. And I've had it worked. I've had bucks come straight into that because they're thinking it's a buck chasing a doe, and all I did was just run to my tree and get up. And they usually come in pretty quick.
I think people regularly underestimate, there's a lot of things going on in the woods. So you might break a stick walking out, but if you can cover it up, or I've seen you do your patented buck run, you grunt it. I've seen it work, right? It works. But I've done the same thing with turkey calls. I always have a turkey call. I'll let out a little, cluck.
Yeah.
And it's I've seen a deer pop its head up when I did the stick, and I let out a call, and they just kind of looked and put their head down. Now, on the flip side, I've seen them run away when I'm turkey hunting for making turkey calls. So it's it's not perfect, but it's what can you do to make it sound like a more natural? Stuff's breaking in the woods all the time. That's just gonna be how it goes. But yeah, no, I think when it comes to rattling and calling and all this stuff, it's you can listen to us say things, but until you try it and you kind of find your own thing, maybe you're a bad caller or maybe you're a great caller. That'll change it a lot too. So, I mean, that's works for me. Like I said, rattling works really well. For me, when I know a buck is likely a more mature buck is cruising, and I think he's in an area, I have found I can pull him off. Now, like I said, with the doe cans, I don't know. I don't have any faith in it. I feel like it's so quiet, it doesn't make enough noise. I don't mess around with it. All right, so you're in a new spot. How do you tell where they're going? How do you tell if a deer, you see a trail, right? Start again. You go out, you see a trail. How do you figure out where the deer is going to and coming from? How do you tell if they're going to a bed? How do you tell which way food is? How do you figure that out?
If it's fresh sign and I can see which way they're walking, if it's snowy out, I mean, it's a late season scenario, but you can easily tell which way those deer are walking by the directions of their hoof prints. That's a pretty easy one. Well, other than that, you just gotta see the trail and just that's the thing though. You don't really know until you're there and see one walking on there at a certain time of the day. At least that's for me.
But if you look for things like swamps with points out in them, or oxbows, or typical bedding area, I think if I can find a trail, look at my onX, zoom out, and be oh, there's a field. Oh, it's probably food. He's probably going this way. And you figure, he eats at night, beds in the day. New research I was just reading shows that bucks will bed in a ton of way more places than people thought. So people think that, bucks are always bedding in two spots, and some deer are, but for the most part, they're they're sleeping all over the place, right? They're napping where they are. So if you can find general rules of thumb, it's they're feeding here, and this is the type of terrain, swamp, fingers into a swamp, whatever. Sometimes out in a CRP field, they'll bed down in there. Those are helpful things. All right, so the question I have to end this session with you is, what do you do if you're not seeing deer? What if you're out and you're just not seeing a freaking deer anywhere? What are you doing? This episode is also brought to you by 2O Gear, innovators in technical hunting clothing. 2O is a newer company. It's based right here in Michigan, and whether you're hunting elk in the mountains or chasing antelope in the plains or traipsing through swamps after that ruddy buck, 2O has you covered with premium jackets and pants, merino wool layers, everything you could possibly need to stay comfortable in the woods. Their products are engineered for functionality and durability, ensuring you stay protected in any conditions. Plus, their camo is really effective. We're big fans. So don't take our word for it, though. Go to 20gear.com and check it out.
Getting up and moving to another spot.
Yeah.
I don't know. It can get discouraging at times. Like, I've definitely had hunts where it's like, we are not seeing a thing over here. And I think we've packed up and moved. And on certain times, like, if we're able to, we just like, okay, well, let's go try over here. Let's try something different. Like, just change it up a little bit. Like, maybe they're not in an area for X, Y, and Z. Maybe the farmer came by and cut that corn. I think we had a hunt last year where there were still standing corn that was on private, but we were hunting public and we weren't seeing a stinking thing, only on private. But as soon as they cut that corn, then those deer moved to a different food source, and we started seeing them in the areas that we originally weren't. But it was almost too late because the trip was done. But it's just, again, staying flexible and going to that next spot and not being glued to that one area.
Yeah. Well, I'll ask one more question. Is there any, like we'll talk like motivation or like mental strategies. There's a lot of things that out there for what people use to get through stuff. But like, things get slow. You get a couple days in, you haven't seen jack squat, and you're like, what's a trick that you use, or what motivates you, or is there a piece of gear you use to like help kind of make you feel like you're cozy at home or anything like that?
I'll have sometimes, I don't do this a lot, but I'll have almost like little rewards at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Like, ooh, I've been saving that for Wednesday. Mm-hmm. Or, hey, when we get back to camp, let's play a game of euchre. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Having different little winning moments, like, okay, I'm excited for this. At least at the end of the day, we can go back and do that. And then you're just a little bit more motivated and just cut loose a little bit and just not think about the hunt maybe for a little bit, so you can get after it the next day.
Booze. You ever think about just booze? If you throw a bottle of wine and, a few beers, I feel like that also helps you. You get back to camp, you're like, all right, I'm going to throw one back with the boys. That sounds good.
There's one thing that Joe loves is a good box wine.
He does love it.
I've heard him multiple times say, I could kill for a cab in a box right now.
I know, a box of cab.
Box of cab.
That's his nickname, actually. I'll say one other thing I'll bring, and I didn't start doing this, but I would go on hunts and my daughter would sneak a stuffed animal in my backpack. So I'd be out hunting and be like, so I've got this one thing that I'll bring with, and it's nice, and it's kind of makes you feel like you're at home, and you miss your family. Because sometimes you get to a spot in a hunt and you're like, what am I doing out here? My wife's at home with all the kids, doing all the things she does on a normal day and all my things. And I'm out here not seeing a freaking deer, and, I'm just spinning my wheels. And sometimes it's nice to have a little, something from home to make things better. So, all right, well, we've talked about pretty much a lot of the aspects that I wanted to talk about when it comes to preparing for hunting. I want to close out the series on the next episode and just talk about, reflections on the hunt and how to learn and how to like take one hunt and roll that into success in future hunts. So we'll stop here and we'll jump into that next time.